I want to talk about some philosophical ideas, and some of this stuff is a little bit far out. And the only people that care about flying with the broom, they are the witches. You have to be a witch. If you are one, then you know that it's possible to fly with the broom. Then you'll go after the rest of it, the technology and the incantations and the verbiage, you know. I don't think it would be a very good ride, but some of this stuff, you have to be, you have to be that kind of person that can relate to it. Anyhow, the Persian poet Molavi, he's very famous in Iran. I don't know other places too. He had a book of poems, and each chapter deals with like a station, spiritual station. Like you go from here to there, and you change as you go along. But then I don't know if it's like the fifth book or so. I have to check it. Anyhow, then there is a little introduction in the beginning before you even start the chapter. He comes out and says that, hey, you really need to be someone like me. You need to have those qualities. You need to be a psychic and a medium and this and that. And, he was also a poet and a mystic. So where he was going, when you start reading, when you disregard what he said and you start reading the stuff, it just makes no sense at all. That's because the stuff that happens in the spirit world, it has some correspondence to the physical reality, it has the physical world, but after a certain point, it just becomes extremely complex and intricate, and you don't know why this happened. I want to tell you some examples. For example, in the movie What Dreams May Come, the actor, I forgot his name, he goes and meets a guide, like a tour guide, and she's very nice lady, and but he feels a certain bond with this person, but it wasn't really a guide. It was the projection of, I think, his daughter or someone like that. So like in the spirit world, the ghosts, they can project themselves any way they want, depending on how they feel. And usually when people die after a certain time, I had a dream about my father-in-law. He had died. After a certain time, they kind of figured out, hey, I can project whoever I want to be. But usually most people, they'll project themselves in the best way they ever looked, which is like in their 20s or 30s. So I saw him in the dream, and he told me, oh, Hassan, look, I look like 30 years old again. I'm young again. How can this be? So, so the boundaries or the restrictions that the physical body poses or imposes on a person, they fall apart. When you are over there on the other side, there is no restriction, there is no impositions. And then, for example, there is a lot of kids, before they're like 4 or 5 or 6, they talk about previous incarnations, or that they could fly and do this and that. Well, I've had a lot of dreams that the ghosts are trying to teach me how to fly or jump off the big buildings. I don't want to be accused of lunacy too. I have a very bad reputation anyhow. But yeah, these are. This is because it can manifest itself any way it wants. And I had another video. It was called "Extended Mind, Disembodied Minds, and God." So, well, I could give an example like that. Is that, for example, when they were developing Internet Explorer, well, the company Microsoft was trying to make it in a way that, for example, when you open the Windows or open like Word, then you would be able to seamlessly jump into a website too. For example, you would open up a window, and then because you're connected to the internet, or if you were a psychic like me, and you knew you had the extended mind that could go and do remote viewing and other things, it would seamlessly integrate with what was out there. It wouldn't be restricted to like my own education and my own upbringing and a certain kind of religiosity. I'm very religious and a very strict person. So this, if I was always operating on that level, then you wouldn't even have one of these videos or any experience. But because I know this aspect exists, I use it, and I let these information or this communion or contact to happen, then my decisions or my knowledge about the world all around me is more complex and more intense, and also is much richer. And even though sometimes it sounds completely nuts, but actually this is a way to make better decisions by just letting your heart decide, or letting these energies that are not based on your own education or the structures that your own personal mind has made, okay, going beyond them, then it becomes a better decision, even though initially it might sound just totally nuts. Then another way that this comes into play, and is very confusing for many people, is the difference between sex and love. When because the Zarathustrans say that when a woman and a man, they fall in love, it's like some kind of light is exchanged in their soul. Okay, so this is the same way of saying when this happens, is their consciousness. This happens in the consciousness. It doesn't happen in the physical world. And sometimes this, for example, usually you see that a guy who's like a downtown guy falls in love with the uptown girl, or people who are completely different religion. She falls in love with somebody completely out of her purview. But it's usually is not based on what you want to do. Like you want to build up these structures that, hey, I'm gonna marry this nice Iranian girl, and she's gonna have nice healthy babies for me, and that. But when it happened, actually the love itself happened. It's completely, with a girl that was completely off the track. And in fact, there were so many things that were socially, economically, that it never went anywhere. But what I'm just trying to bring out the concept that what happens in your consciousness, okay, that's the determining factor. That's the thing that's the rich. It's richer. Like in the other video I had, that the consciousness is richer than any computational engine. Well, in fact, the human brain is also a computational engine, and it constructs different structure, different expectations, different desires. But it's just like being in a Microsoft window that is not connected to the internet. It's just a very limited set of beliefs and ideas, and when people just operate in that, then things fall apart, because the outside world is also like a computer, and what's going on outside world, it does matter, because you are constantly in interaction with this outside world. And when you be mindful of what's going on, then your decisions will be better decisions. Okay, now another way that paying attention to your own consciousness and what goes on inside here is very valuable is when like somebody is public speaking, talking to a lot of different people. Okay, many people, they go to very good colleges, very good schools, or they read the newspapers, or they're very aware of what Christianity says, or what Buddha said. They have a knowledge, and in fact, you can go on Google and you can go Wikipedia and get the full scope. But what the way to attract the people and make them interested in your topic, in your idea, is that when an experience, it happened for you, it's personal, and it is real, it's novel. Say for example, I had an experience that I mentioned in the video, richness of the spirit world. Okay, this is a personal experience, but you cannot find this experience in like a Wikipedia, or maybe later on they will, but it was personal. And then people attach to it, they identify with it, because it's not something that you could take some money out of your pocket and go to a store and you cannot purchase it. And the same goes, for example, if I like a girl and I've fallen for her, okay, well usually it's a two-way street, but I cannot go to her house and pay some cash and obtain her. Okay, this is it doesn't work that way. It's so complex and so personal that you just have to go date or be in contact with her. The same goes with any kind of and this is the wide scope, any kind of artistic or even scientific or religious too. I think there's a lot of areas in life that you cannot really do very well if the work that you're doing is not original. It's something that somebody else composed, or you can tack it together from stuff that you read in Google or Wikipedia, and it's stupid to go after those things, because when the public or the people who go to theater, when they look at it, they know, hey, this is shit, this is no good, because somebody else, it reminds them of another movie or another production. Okay, so for example, when I act in different movies, okay, say for example there is a war movie, I bring out what I experienced that's very similar to this. Okay, so when the audience see that, they know this is real. What actually what happens is the camera takes a bunch of clips, and then they go into editing and they cut it up and transpose it against each other. So basically the director is telling his story. You know, this guy got shot and this is how painful it was, la la. But when they see me in that painful state, it's I'm experiencing the pain that I had that was similar to this. It's really my pain, okay? But then the director lies for me and cuts it up and sells it off as his pain or the story's pain. Anyhow, so and we can see that a computer that's not connected to the internet or to some network is not really worth very much, because it's tied to just certain education, certain upbringing, certain liberal values, stuff like that. But then the one that's connected to the internet, it can self-correct itself. Everything is updated up to technology, and also everything is more complex and more intelligent. Let's see. But I want to tell some examples of when this is not the case. For example, I used to drive cab, and I used to use paper maps or a book of maps, and I had to really look it up. And I had problems. I'm not very fast with those things, and also I had some vision problems later on. So it took me time, and I also make a lot of mistakes going from place to place. But then the companies came up with the GPS, and the first one that I bought was Garmin. I could not believe the way, in the beginning I wouldn't believe that this thing even worked. But later on, as time went on, I installed, there was a little SD card you put in, and it asks you what locality you're working. I was telling Southern California, and it will go from there. So I could not believe the changes, how this thing knew all the addresses, that point by direction, because the universe that I was operating on or operating in was a limited universe. It was just the addresses and houses or airports in this locality. So when a universe that you're operating in is a limited universe, well, if you have a computer that's not hooked to the computer, well, the GPS is connected to the gravitational system, but it could also not be connected. If you give it the beginning address and the end address, it could sense the movement of the car and make a pretty good directions, or you could read it off and then make the corrections. But what I'm saying is that in a lot of places, say for example in politics of a given place, a politician could be well versed on how to threaten other politicians and get things done in there. But then this is not a limited universe, because there are other countries, and there are other planets. But so this is one example of when you have a limited universe, having a set of rules and going by there and doing this and that, you can function pretty good. But reality is never like that. Then in another video, I'm going to talk about well, I want to save this other one for 2019 psychic predictions of how because there is no more lag time between the production of artistic work or certain sentiments, and when it becomes a part of the structure or education of individuals, there is very little lag time. Then the identities, the real identities that a place has, for example, United States, it was an Indian country. It was there's a lot of Indians still, like Sioux Nation, or it has the identity of a black nation, or has the identity of a Muslims. Well, these identities are repressed because the culture that was built up and enforced through push media does not accept that culture, and it has its own Anglo-Saxon culture. But when the push media is reversed, and the media is what anybody like me could produce, then these disparate identities are going to show up, and then you say, "Oh my God, this place isn't this what I thought at all." It's most of the landmass is Indian, and then there are areas on the coast that are like a lot of them are Spanish. So this identity and this what happens in the consciousness, it becomes dominant. For example, in the New Age philosophies, they say that after a certain age of enlightenment comes, where God directly interferes with the affairs. That, I think this is 2019. And onward, things are going to change, because this consciousness or collective consciousness that really comes from you it is going to be the dominant trend. Okay, so well, I congratulate you. You have lasted this far in the video. These ideas are not that simple, and my videos are mostly lecture, mostly research. And please subscribe and leave me a comment. Thank you very much.